truth is the most convincing story that maps onto reality, and that's why the central narrative is falling apart.
Right now in the United States, people should not be walking around with masks.
We must see the central narrative for the fiction that it is. We are Americans.
While elections are sometimes messy, this was a secure election.
The founders began the fight for human liberty and self-governance, and it's up to us to finish the job.
I'll tell you what, we are in a truth emergency right now.
This is the end game.
It's Friday, August 23rd, 2024, the 1,311th day of dystopia. I'm your moderator, Chris Paul. Let's be reasonable. A warm welcome and hello to all of you listening through a paid subscription at imyourmoderator.substack.com. You can become a paid subscriber for as little as $50 a year or $5 a month. And when you do, you will get the ad-free experience. You'll be able to participate in the conversation over on Substack, and you'll be invited to the interactive live stream every Wednesday afternoon. And if you can't or you simply don't want to, continue listening to the podcast for free on Substack, a wide variety of podcast platforms, and of course, Rumble. All I ask is that you share it with your friends. You can find the links to the podcast, the writing, the social media, and the merch site by visiting linktree.com/I'mYourModerator. Anyone who understands the roller coaster we've been on these past few years knows we haven't reached the end yet, and there may still be hard times to come. And as we add $1 trillion to the national debt every 100 days, we could be headed for some shaky financial times. If you're like me, you're figuring out how to diversify and make sure some seeds are planted for whatever may come. And that's one of the many reasons I think Bitcoin is part of our future. But it's not only about money. Bitcoin looks to be a critical part of the next generation of technology, communications, energy, verification, and even national defense. I'd encourage everyone to do their research and do it now. And if you're convinced of the likelihood that Bitcoin is an essential part of our future, then you'll need an on-ramp. I recommend River. River empowers you to grow your portfolio without any unwanted surprises and eliminates third-party custodians, putting you in control of your assets. Open an account with no minimum purchase requirement. You can get your Bitcoin journey started with just $1. Visit partner.river.com/reasonable to create your River account today. That's partner.river.com/reasonable. Now, I know that many of you out there understand the need to diversify assets, or maybe you're looking to protect your retirement savings, but you're not quite there yet on Bitcoin, and you feel better about precious metals. I get that too. I think going in multiple directions is wise, and I do that myself. And when it comes to buying precious metals, you want to be working with a good company, and that's why I've partnered with Goldco. Goldco is a 6-time Inc. 5000 winner, 2022 Company of the Year, and they've helped people like you and me place over $2 billion in gold and silver. And I have gotten silver from Goldco. And right now they're offering my supporters up to $10,000 in bonus silver while supplies last. Don't pass this offer up. Go to reasonablegold.com now. This is your opportunity to protect you and your family from an out-of-control government before it's too late. So don't wait a second longer. Take action today. Click on the link in the podcast notes or go to reasonablegold.com now and get your free gold kit, your free IRA kit. You'll be glad you did. So we are finally done with the week-long television commercial for communism known as the Democrat National Convention. And we are told by our bettors that it was a huge success. The vibes-based campaign, the joy-based campaign, all of the celebrity appearances, and a star-studded roster of old, corrupt, demented perverts, and a bunch of young, up-and-coming, corrupt, demented perverts none of whom anybody's ever seen before, let everyone know that Donald Trump is very, very, very bad. So bad that no matter how bad you think things are now, they could be even worse by going back to the way they were just a few years ago when things were not nearly this bad. Now, I say they told everybody, but did they? How many people were watching? It's been reported that they drew around 20 million or so viewers each night of the convention. This, according to the Nielsen ratings. They outperformed the Republican National Convention by around 2 million viewers each night. That's what's been reported by the Nielsen company, and that includes the major television networks, CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, and a few others. It does not include TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Amazon Prime, and those streaming platforms. And it certainly doesn't include restreams hosted by various online content creators who will stream the event and then comment on the side. So those Nielsen ratings don't tell us a whole lot about how widely viewed these events were. They just tell us that people who watch political news on cable television tuned in for the conventions. Younger people, more active people, people who are likely to be influential online, which means more likely to change people's minds, generally speaking, would not be included in those ratings. And there are some hints, at least, that the Democrat National Convention was not nearly as popular as they tried to portray. I think I mentioned earlier in the week that there were reports, just reports, of people being offered money to attend the event. I cannot verify that in any way, just a possibility to keep in mind. And there were some other strange features. The crowd noise, the cheering often seemed like it was being pumped through the loudspeakers and would then cut off unnaturally. They took the supposed president of the United States and had him speak after midnight on Monday, while Kamabla began her speech last night around 10:15 Eastern time, so they could attempt to maximize on viewership. But that wasn't all. The Democrats also had a trick up their sleeve, and the trick they had up their sleeve was pretending they had a trick up their sleeve. This is the Daily Mail from yesterday. Behave yourselves. Beyonce frenzy at DNC hits fever pitch. Just about everyone at the Democrat National Convention is anticipating the thrill of a Beyonce bombshell, especially Kamala Harris's college sorority sisters, who are getting VIP treatment on the historic occasion. We love Kamabla and are here for her, Cynthia Kramer Osage told the Daily Beast in a text message, emphasizing her as the woman they consider to be the star of the show, though the reality is they'd all love to see Queen Bey as well. The entire convention is buzzing with rumors and high hopes that the global megastar will make a dramatic appearance Thursday night as Harris accepts her party's nomination to be the first black female president. And if it is in the books, it is the most tightly held of intelligence, especially since the Chicks are set to sing the national anthem to kick off Thursday night, and Pink has already been announced as the closing night performer. And the Chicks, of course, are the Dixie Chicks, who got canceled in 2020 and had to change their name because they were told that the word Dixie conjures up the ghosts of the antebellum South, and that's racist. You might remember that back in the middle of the very deadliest pandemic of all time and the summer of love after George Floyd died from a fentanyl overdose while being restrained by a policeman's knee, if he existed in the first place. We had a spate of pop musicians changing their artist names. The Dixie Chicks became just the Chicks. Lady Antebellum became Lady A. Between that and the black squares on Instagram, it's amazing they weren't able to solve racism. Back to the Daily Beast, even DNC convention chair Minion Moore acknowledged she's in the dark with everyone else. I think anything could be a surprise even to us sometimes, Moore told MSNBC early this week when asked about the rumors. White House political director Emmy Ruiz added to the hype Thursday when she tweeted out a bee emoji, long the symbol used by Beyonce's fans online. So the White House political director, knowing the context of her post, tweeted out a bee emoji anyway. A senior DNC source told the Daily Beast that the only DNC official who would know for sure if a global superstar like Beyonce is participating in Kamala-palooza would be Ricky Kirshner, the award-winning live televised event producer who is orchestrating the entire production in Chicago. And if Taylor Swift, who does have time off until her next Eras Tour concert on October 18th in Miami, were to appear to fulfill Democrats' wildest dreams, again, only Kirshner would know. A DNC official with close knowledge of event planning who requested anonymity because his neck would be on the line for speaking freely about the forum's most sensitive topic, said he could not confirm or deny whether Beyonce will grace the convention with her presence Thursday night. Questions about Swift rumors weren't even indulged. If the Queen Bee Beyonce performs Friday, it will be fitting, a gift from one queen to another, Harris's former classmate Kramer Osagi said. But a democratic one. Yeah, you see, it's not like a queen in a monarchy. That's not the image they want to portray. Just two really popular, famous, powerful women getting together to help one another out. So, all right, enough of entertainment gossip news. Why did I share that entertainment gossip news? Is it because I love talking about Beyonce? No, in fact, I don't really like talking about Beyonce that much, but I will talk about her for just a moment. You see, I actually got the displeasure of seeing a Beyonce show. I went to the Coachella Music Festival in 2018. Beyonce was the headliner. I went on weekend 2. So the first weekend, Beyonce at Coachella became immediately the most important thing that ever happened. The greatest musical performance of all time. It was not only a great musical performance, it was a great cultural spectacle. It had so much meaning. Marching bands from historically black colleges and universities, or something. Important messages in her costumes, or whatever. I went to the show. There was dancing. A lot of people were dancing, including Beyonce. And she does a lot of dancing, takes a lot of energy, a certain level of fitness. All of that, very impressive. Very impressive dancing. Very impressive choreography. All sorts of lights and colors and things and people moving around on stage. It's very impressive. And to the extent that she's singing while doing all of that, I suppose that's impressive too. Now, I'm not sure that she's actually singing doing all of that. It seems a little unnecessary. They probably have some sort of hybrid program where she sings certain things and other things are just in the sound mix already. And of course, she's not playing instruments. She doesn't write her songs. She is a pop star, but more importantly, she is a corporate product, and most of what people understand as the character of Beyonce is a corporate product as well. It's all marketing. Beyonce was creating songs of female and black empowerment during a cultural phase of propagandized female and black empowerment. It lined up perfectly. Between songs, Beyonce would stop and give a speech about how she and all the women in the crowd were very oppressed, and we should all feel for them and the struggles they go through. A Beyonce concert is a time of catharsis and healing, and she wanted to experience that with her fans, who all paid literally thousands of dollars to be there. So if they're oppressed, they're not that oppressed. And once she brought everybody down into understanding her true oppression, then she switched immediately to songs about how women run the world and how great it is to be a single lady. The concert lasted for way too long, and I was very thankful when it ended. If someone gave me free tickets to see Beyonce and took care of all of my arrangements, I still would not go. If someone paid me even a fair amount of money, I still would not go. It's just an experience I never, ever want to have again. But I didn't bring this up so that we could review Beyonce concerts. I brought this up because they allowed the rumor of a potential Beyonce appearance and performance, and then allowed the layered on rumor of a Taylor Swift potential appearance and performance, and fed into those rumors just to gain more attention. Because the first black, female, Indian, fake vice president and presidential candidate to be the first female, black, Indian, fake president, having never won any delegates or primaries or anything, that person wasn't enough to keep the attention on the DNC through the end of her speech. And they knew that. So having Jamie Foxx and Pink and the Chicks as opening acts to Kamabla wasn't enough. They fed into rumors that there was going to be a special guest, but no special guest materialized. Here's what they had to say about it.
In anticipation here and elsewhere that there may be a special guest, I am told by Democrats that Kamala Harris was their guest. They did not want a celebrity at the end of this convention to essentially compete with her. One senior advisor telling me this is a deadly serious election. And if you looked at the end of this program, having Leon Panetta come on, the former defense secretary, really presenting Vice President Harris as a plausible commander-in-chief, that is one of the reasons I'm told that there was not a celebrity performance at the end.
Got that? They didn't want anyone competing with Kamala Harris. They didn't want anyone to make it seem like the whole thing wasn't all that serious, even though their candidate didn't win any primaries. She was just chosen. And what is the candidate known for? A jobs program with Willie Brown and cackling. They had Jamie Foxx come out dressed up like the rent is too damn high guy. They had a drum line where two of the drummers basically got in a 69 position and one of them played drums upside down. They didn't have a serious convention. Their whole thing is about how their campaign is vibes based. They don't even have an agenda up on their own website. And did you hear Jeff Zeleny talk about how Leon Panetta made the event more serious? He was a former Secretary of Defense. He was also a former CIA director. He was also one of the 51 signees of the letter from former intelligence officials saying that Hunter Biden's laptop had all the earmarks, wrong word, of a Russian disinformation operation. He was also, as a longtime member of the deep state, out there in 2019 doing media appearances to support the Trump-Ukraine impeachment hoax. And oh yeah, he was also Bill Clinton's chief of staff for a couple years. So Kamala Harris was the special guest. It was all about Kamala the whole time. They didn't even want a celebrity appearance. My best friend, when I was like 6 years old, told me that he had a Millennium Falcon and a lightsaber in his attic. The Democrats playing up the rumors that Beyonce or Taylor Swift might come to Queen Kamala's coronation would have been like that friend telling me that Luke Skywalker would be at his birthday party. And strangely enough, Luke Skywalker was actually at the Democrat National Convention. But of course, there is no actual Luke Skywalker. That's just Mark Hamill, the washed up communist actor. But they wanted to keep it a serious affair. How serious? This serious.
You love somebody, you want them to have safe drinking water. And when you love somebody, you want them to have a dignified job. And so, America, it's simple. Let's get to work and elect Kamala Harris and Tim Walz for our planet, for our future, for our present, and for our people. God bless.
So like I said, very serious. That reminds me of my club days. And oh, by the way, while that's playing, they're panning around the arena looking at all the happy communists, clapping and dancing and cheering in masks. It's all just so embarrassing. Not too long after that, they had a trio of women sort of related to Kamala Harris come out on the stage. Their names were Helena Hudlin, who is the goddaughter of Kamala Harris, apparently, Mina Harris, who is her niece, and then Ella Emhoff, who is Doug Emhoff's daughter. So none of these people are Kamala Harris's daughter because Kamala Harris doesn't have any children. All of them are presented, though, as if they were Kamala's children. They're stand-ins, they're proxies. They exist to show you that Kamala Harris has the capacity to care for your children just like she cares for these other people who are someone else's children. She's not an obsessive, incompetent careerist who will do anything for money and power. She's someone who will tell the world that she's basically a mother to these children that aren't hers, just like Michelle Obama did. CNN published a fine piece of propaganda about their appearance with a headline, "All the fashion Ella Emhoff wore this week at the Democrat National Convention." Now, Doug Emhoff's wife, by virtue of the fact that Kamala Harris has spent the last 3.5 years pretending to be vice president, she got a whole range of opportunities that no one else who's, let's say, like her would have ever gotten. For instance, she was signed to IMG Models, which is one of the biggest modeling agencies in the world. And Ella Emhoff is, let's just say, not a model. I think maybe she just got the title of honorary model. I guess that's a thing now because she doesn't have a portfolio on the IMG website, and I'm not sure she's ever had professional photos taken. She basically just wears silly clothing as part of her personal brand, and we are supposed to think that that's very hot, very fashionable. CNN, in the caption to the photo of the three of them, wrote, "The convention has been a masterclass in the different codes of female power dressing." So again, very serious. So the event wore on through Jamie Foxx, through Gretchen Whitmer, and finally we got to Kamabla's sister, Maya Harris, who gave a very serious speech following the also very serious Adam Kinzinger. And pay attention, maybe this is one of those crazy things where I'm picking up on something that's not there, but listen to the applause and how it dies down perfectly at the opportune time for the PA announcer to let you know that Maya Harris is on the way.
For our bedrock values and vote for Kamala Harris. God bless you.
Please welcome lawyer, policy advocate, and sister of the Vice President, Maya Harris.
Hello, Chicago. In 1958, a 19-year-old from India left the only country she'd ever known to chart her own path in America. She came here to pursue an education, but she stayed here to build a life. Her name was Dr. Shamala Gopalan Harris. But we called her Mommy. Mommy was so many things to so many people. A civil rights activist, a scientist, a devoted mother to her 2 little girls. But most of all, Mommy was a trailblazer who defied the odds and defined herself. And when it came to Kamala and me, Mommy had great expectations for us, but she had even greater expectations of us.
So she was a civil rights activist and a scientist. Amazing. Her dad, of course, was a communist professor, and that's kind of what the code language civil rights activist means. Because if these were people who actually cared about civil rights, then they probably wouldn't be censoring millions of Americans in violation of the First Amendment. They wouldn't be trying to take away people's right to defend themselves. But they're not civil rights activists. They're just communist agitators. Just like the BLM Antifa domestic terrorists outside that venue, the people who gave us the Summer of Love. And I can't remember, what did they call it back then? Oh yeah, they called it the Summer of Love back then too. But what is with the mommy thing? Isn't that like a little creepy? It creeped me out, that's all I can say. Regardless, it's certainly not serious. Now, again, we have to remind ourselves this is a vibes-based campaign, a joy-based campaign, and what they want to do is make sure to put a happy face on all of that communism that they're now proud to reveal. They want you to know that by the time you own nothing, you will be happy. In fact, you'll be forced to be happy the entire time. You're going to have to say you're happy from now until the end of your life, which will be increasing in its misery due to the communism. But if everyone says they're happy, like they have to, no one will ever know otherwise. And also no one will get hurt. So Maya Harris spends a while talking about her mommy and Kamala's mommy. And of course, this week we got communism. So does that count as a legitimate commie mommy? And if you know where you've heard that before, I thank you for your 4 years of support. So I don't know about you, but in a 5-minute speech introducing a candidate for president of the United States, who we're told has already been vice president for 4 years, a senator before that, and California attorney general before that, do we really need to hear 2 minutes of what your mommy was like? All of these speeches are the same. They're about everyone's personal life and how they're inspiring and how they'll eventually inspire you too. All of the speeches are aspirational. Mommy said we could do whatever we wanted when we get big. And we believed her. And now just look at my sister. She's going to be fake president. She's fake vice president right now. Look, my face is on the screen in the arena. And Daddy, well, Daddy was a communist, but Daddy wasn't around that long. But when he was around, he told us we could be anything we wanted to, as long as it was exactly the same as everyone else, and we never tried to do anything else. I'm just kidding. That's not what communism is like for elites. And just look, Daddy said we would all be equal, but here we are, me and my sister, about to be president and the president's sister. It's so amazing. This couldn't have ever happened anywhere but America. Even though, of course, it's happening all around the world, the global regime absolutely always tries to take sort of attractive middle-aged women who don't have any political support and then just make them president through the media and stolen elections. And if anyone ever contests that, well, that person's a dictator. And not to be sexist, they do it with men, too, particularly gay men willing to get married to trans women, like Barack Obama and Emmanuel Macron. But as far as women go, they pulled it off in Finland. They pulled it off in New Zealand. They tried it in Belarus in 2020. That failed. They tried to smuggle one in on the back of a demented old fool down in Venezuela. They're trying to create a new one in Russia after the Alexei Navalny experiment didn't work. They're going to go with his wife. And of course, that'll never work either. But my point is that a story like Kamala Harris's couldn't have happened anywhere but in America. And of course, that's not true, but we say it because it's aspirational. And the aspiration makes us feel good, and it's a joy-based campaign. It's a vibes-based campaign. We're supposed to feel good. We're supposed to feel good about how much we hate Donald Trump and all his supporters and how we will do anything to be given permission through illusionary public consensus to torture them however we want. You know, vibes. But no one vibes harder than Kamala Harris. So let's get to the main event. Apologies to those of you out there thinking we can't skip over Roy Cooper. And you're welcome to all of you who are like, who's Roy Cooper? But here we are, the fake vice president.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Good evening. Oh, my goodness. Good you. Thank you all. Thank you all. Okay, we got to get to some business. We got to get to some business. Okay, thank you all. Okay. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you, please, thank you, please, thank you so very much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Okay, let's get to business. Let's get to business. All right. So.
How's that for vibes-based? Just a multi-minute long standing ovation, unstoppable cheering for Kamabla Harris. Chants of USA, USA, flags flying everywhere. How do you compete with Donald Trump's enthusiasm? Well, you just make it look like you have that much enthusiasm too. So much enthusiasm that Beyonce might even come later. She's not coming later, but she might. Anything is possible until it doesn't happen. The point is that Kamala is extremely popular, so popular she can get a 2-minute standing ovation with nonstop cheering anywhere she goes, anytime, except for all those times she shows up somewhere and no one is there. But hey, it's entirely possible that the Democrats filled the 2/3 of that arena that were open with real people who wanted to be there. The United Center is a rather large arena. It can hold up to 23,500 people for a concert. The stage setup for the DNC was not a setup that would allow for that. Due to the size of the massive stage setup and some of the seating arrangements, but it was probably somewhere in the 20,000 ballpark for an upper limit maximum capacity. Now, the entire place looked packed pretty much the entire time because everybody in there is holding up signs and holding up these flags. And of course, those were given out to everybody because they help make the entire place look like it's in motion, look like there are people everywhere. So she enters to a legion of screaming fans and supporters. USA, USA, USA. Hey, that's Kamala Harris, right? Is she even eligible to be president? Oh, no, she's not. That's weird. What's she doing up there? Is this like some kind of fake campaign for a fake election or something? But she says, good evening, good evening, good evening, good evening, as she always does. And then thank you, 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 thank you. Donald Trump was doing play-by-play on Truth Social throughout Kamabla's speech. And he started out with too many thank yous, too rapidly said. What's going on with her? And that's a good question. What was going on with her? What a weird TV show this is. Trump then asks, where's Hunter? That's confused many Democrats. They're like, what do you mean? Why are you even bringing up Hunter Biden? And then he noted that Walz was an assistant coach, not a coach. Is there anything Tim Walz doesn't lie about? It turns out the answer's no. Even the mainstream media has spent the week doing damage control and providing retroactive continuity on Tim Walz's former statements. It turns out he just makes things up, kind of like Joe Biden. But a couple minutes later, after she was finished giving her shout outs to all her BFFs in the crowd, that's when she finally got down to business and the conversation turned serious. I'm just kidding. That's when she started talking about mommy, too.
The path that led me here in recent weeks was no doubt unexpected. But I'm no stranger to unlikely journeys. So my mother, our mother, Kamala Harris, had one of her own. And I miss her every day, and especially right now. And I know she's looking down smiling. I know that. So my mother was 19 when she crossed the world alone, traveling from India to California with an unshakable dream to be the scientist who would cure breast cancer. When she finished school, she was supposed to return home to a traditional arranged marriage. But as fate would have it, she met my father, Donald Harris, a student from Jamaica. They fell in love and got married, and that act of self-determination made my sister Maya and me. Growing up, we moved a lot. I will always remember that big Mayflower truck packed with all our belongings, ready to go to Illinois, to Wisconsin, and wherever our parents' jobs took us. My early memories of our parents together are very joyful ones. A home filled with laughter and music, Aretha, Coltrane, and Miles. At the park, my mother would say, "Stay close." But my father would say, as he smiled, "Run, Kamala, run. Don't be afraid. Don't let anything stop you." From my earliest years, he taught me to be fearless. But the harmony between my parents did not last. When I was in elementary school, they split up. And it was mostly my mother who raised us.
And she goes on about how her mom came from humble beginnings but could finally buy the girls a house. Now, she didn't talk about how her mom actually moved to Canada with them when Kamala was a teenager. They talk about Wisconsin and Illinois, but not Canada. I thought it was exotic and cultured to live in other countries. Now, Kami's mommy didn't come from all that humble a background. Kamala said her mother was supposed to be in an arranged marriage, but instead she met a Marxist professor in America who apparently comes from a line of slave owners in Jamaica, and she knew she had to marry that guy for a little while. She makes it sound like her mommy came overseas after hiding in the hull of a ship, but her family was in the upper caste in India. Kamala's grandfather was a government official. And in no way did Kamala Harris defy the odds to become what she became. Someone of very marginal competence and intelligence who nonetheless was able to continue rising within the party of false decorum and a corporate leftist global regime political structure in the United States. She claims her mother was a scientist who wanted to cure breast cancer. Well, her mother didn't get to do that, and that's very sad, both for her mother and for people who have suffered with breast cancer. But it's kind of a strange thing how they always credit themselves with wins that they haven't even achieved. Like we're supposed to think it's important that Kamala could be the first Black Indian woman president. I mean, she can't be president because this isn't a real election, but she could be known as the first Black Indian woman president, and that is something to aspire to. And because Kamala can aspire to it, it's our responsibility to help her get there. Now, Kami's mommy did work at some prestigious universities, but I haven't found any peer-reviewed publications that she was part of, and I have not found any citations. I'm not the world's greatest science guy, but it doesn't sound like she was either. And then, of course, we go on to the pandering. Oh, Illinois. Remember when I lived in Illinois? How about you, Wisconsin? You're a quote-unquote battleground state. Did you know I used to live there for a little while? And then, of course, you've got to up the racial street cred talking about jazz. And we're not going to talk about jazz the way that people who aren't real jazz fans talk about jazz. We're going to talk about jazz the way that people who are real jazz fans talk about jazz. And that's how everyone will know that we're being authentic when we say Aretha, Coltrane, and Miles. If there's one thing Kami did with Kami's mommy and Daddy Kami, it's listen to jazz in the park. And while her protective mommy always wanted her to stay close, her communist father said, "Go ahead and run wherever you want, Kamala. Don't be afraid." But where were we? This is a serious speech, so let's get to the serious parts of this speech. And of course, like I said, Trump noticed that too. He wrote a lot of talk about childhood. We've got to get to the border, inflation, and crime. And of course, there was nothing specific about any of those issues. No acknowledgement for how the uniparty she represents is responsible for all those issues. Nothing said expressing an understanding of those issues. It's all just emotive phrases and platitudes about how great the world would be if we just made it better. So what you need to do is give us the power to make it better, and then someday we might do that. And no, we didn't make anything better over the last 4 years. In fact, we made things far, far worse. But just think about how good the next 4 years could be if you gave us a chance. Because there's no backsliding. We can't go back to those times where things were better before we messed them up. Now, I said at the beginning of the week, this long-form commercial airing nationwide for the Democrat Communist Party's newfound pride in its communism was attempting to invert reality in real time right before our eyes. Everything good everyone else has done was their doing. Everything bad that they've done, everyone else's fault. You're angry at their lockdowns, their mask mandates, their vaccine mandates, their stolen elections, their wars of choice on your dime, the fact that every day they try to strip away more control. Well, my friend, I guess you just hate freedom, because these are the people who support freedom. Donald Trump might say he supports freedom. His supporters might think they support freedom. But you can't have freedom when you're getting shot every day, as all of us must be doing. Now, we talked yesterday about how Tim Walz accused Donald Trump of wanting to pursue a nationwide abortion ban. And Trump came out the next morning and made it very clear he has no plans whatsoever to pursue a nationwide abortion ban. It's just not going to happen. Well, they didn't bother adjusting Kamabla's speech, so here she is reiterating that false claim about Donald Trump, and then she gets into talking about freedom.
This is what's happening in our country because of Donald Trump. And understand, he is not done. As a part of his agenda, he and his allies would limit access to birth control, ban medication abortion, and enact a nationwide abortion ban with or without Congress. And get this, he plans to create a national anti-abortion coordinator and force states to report on women's miscarriages and abortions. Simply put, they are out of their minds. And one must ask, why exactly is it that they don't trust women? Well, we trust women. We trust women. And when Congress passes a bill to restore reproductive freedom, as President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law. In this election, many other fundamental freedoms are at stake. The freedom to live safe from gun violence in our schools, communities, and places of worship. The freedom to love who you love openly and with pride. The freedom to breathe clean air and drink clean water and live free from the pollution that fuels the climate crisis. And the freedom that unlocks all the others, the freedom to vote. With this election, we finally have the opportunity to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and the Freedom to Vote Act.
So that's the problem. Donald Trump is going to pursue a nationwide abortion ban, which he isn't going to do because he already did his part on the abortion issue. But he's going to do it because he doesn't trust women. And Republicans don't trust women. But is that really the truth? Because I feel like maybe Republicans are more honest about the abortion issue with men and women alike than Democrats are, because Democrats say that it's about a woman's right to choose. It's all about a woman's body, ignoring the fact that there's a baby's body in there too, and that baby doesn't get a choice. But that's only part of it, because the Democrats are also hiding from women and barring from the conversation the fact that there is actually an industry set up around and a market set up around the procurement, sale, and use of aborted fetal tissue. And that's not even mentioning the whole part about how, by some studies, 50 to 75% of the women who make that journey to cross our southern border being raped along the way. Who knows how many unwanted pregnancies come out of that? I wonder if the extraordinary number of illegal aliens who are brought into California has any connection to all the radical pro-abortion industry legislation they're always trying to pass there. But think about all these freedoms, the freedom to live safe from gun violence. I mean, I've done that now successfully for 45 years, living way out in the country, right in the middle of massive cities, owning guns, not owning guns. Somehow, I've been able to avoid gun violence for 45 years without even the freedom to do it. But I guess they're going to give me more freedom by taking one of my freedoms away. Vote for Kamala, and you can also have the freedom to love who you love openly and with pride. And I've been doing that the whole time without them giving me the freedom either. This is wild. The freedom to breathe clean air and drink clean water. Well, here's the thing. The science says this is clean air and clean water. Are you telling me it's not? And if it's not clean air and clean water, who's made it that way? I feel like it's probably not Donald Trump. And the freedom that unlocks all the other freedoms, the freedom to vote, that's an awfully weird thing to say when you're a fake vice president who got in office by depriving people of the right to vote. And you might think that sounds strange because these, of course, are the people who talk about turnout all the time. The more votes, the better. They tell us that we are suppressing the vote when we want voter ID or when we don't want illegal aliens to vote. So, of course, they want to make sure everyone can vote, except they don't. And the thing is, when you are changing vote counts with machine algorithms, those algorithms assign a value to each vote. Rather than that value always equaling one vote for Trump equals one vote for Trump. One vote for Biden equals one vote for Biden. They change it so that one vote for Trump equals 0.6 for Trump. And one vote for Biden equals 1.4 votes for Biden. Isn't that weird that when the political opponent is someone the uniparty regime who controls the elections doesn't like, that person's supporters' votes only count 3/5? It's like we're all slaves or something. But that can't be. Donald Trump is responsible for slavery, not the woman whose dad was from a family of slave owners, or the same woman who's also allowing a slave trade at the southern border to take place right now on behalf of the people who put her in the office of fake vice president. The freedom that unlocks all the other freedoms, the freedom to vote. So if our elections aren't free and fair and safe and secure, and the reported results don't accurately reflect the will and intent of the voters, then we are not really free to vote. And if we're not really free to vote, then we actually don't have all those other freedoms. What exactly is Kami saying about the freedom to vote in this country? It seems like these communists don't actually know what freedom means, and of course the point is that they don't. Bernie Sanders used to give a whole spiel about this, about how you couldn't be free if you couldn't afford a list of things that other people could have. The government needs to confiscate enough property so it can redistribute that property. And once that property is fully redistributed, only then can everyone be free. And they'll be free while their stuff is still being constantly confiscated. I'm telling you, it's all backwards and upside down for these commies. Kamabla, who still has no agenda on her website and did not outline an agenda last night, tied Trump to an abortion ban he never proposed and does not support on the basis that it's part of an agenda that he didn't come up with, does not support, and has already disavowed.
We know what a second Trump term would look like. It's all laid out in Project 2025, written by his closest advisors, and its sum total is to pull our country back to the past. But America, we are not going back. We are not going back. We are not going back. We are not going back to when Donald Trump tried to cut Social Security and Medicare. We are not going back to when he tried to get rid of the Affordable Care Act, when insurance companies could deny people with pre-existing conditions. We are not going to let him eliminate the Department of Education that funds our public schools. We are not going to let him end programs like Head Start that provide preschool and child care for our children. America, we are not going back. And we are charting a new way forward.
We know what a second Trump term will be like because it's all laid out in an agenda he had nothing to do with writing. An agenda he has disavowed, an agenda he has said he will not follow, an agenda that is specifically in conflict with his actual plans. Project 2025 actually has agendas written out for all of the administrative state agencies, including the ones that Donald Trump says he's going to do away with. And of course, they know this, but they don't care because they operate with a propaganda media who tells everyone who might be watching this long-form television commercial that everything Kamala Harris is saying is true. In fact, they've built those narratives up over the course of the last few years. It doesn't matter that Kamala's lying because all the people Kamala cares about already believe her. And because the people in control of the information flow and the propaganda media always set the terms of debate and the terms of conversation, normie Republicans are spending all their time arguing in favor of Project 2025 policies that Donald Trump disavows, just so they can own the libs. And because a lot of their favorite TV characters are in line with the same Republican establishment that created Project 2025. Kamala then moved into a scripted back and forth, the theme of the week being we will not go back, we are going to go forward. And we talked the other day about the use of the word forward in historical communist propaganda under Mao and under Lenin. It describes the inexorable march of history. It describes how they're always geared toward progress. It's very aspirational. Things will always be better in the future if you continue to give us more power, more wealth, and you continue to elevate our status in society. We'll all be equal, but if you want to move forward into a better tomorrow, you'll make it so that some of us are more equal. But of course, that wasn't all. She also had this little segment from a little earlier in the speech.
And every day in the courtroom, I stood proudly before a judge and I said 5 words: Kamala Harris for the people. And to be clear, my entire career, I've only had one client, the people. And so, on behalf of the people, on behalf of every American, regardless of party, race, gender, or the language your grandmother speaks, on behalf of my mother and everyone who has ever set out on their own unlikely journey, on behalf of Americans like the people I grew up with, people who work hard, chase their dreams, and look out for one another. On behalf of everyone whose story could only be written in the greatest nation on earth, I accept your nomination to be President of the United States of America.
So Kamala Harris for the people. She, as Attorney General, was representing the people of California, so she would come in and say, Kamala Harris for the people, because she's prosecuting on behalf of the state. And in communist lingo, the state and the people are exactly the same thing. And in communist political science, when you steal elections and get the majority, well, that means you have the majority. And if you have the majority, then you can speak as though everything you say is on behalf of the people. They have, quote unquote, democratically selected you, which means that anything you do from that moment on is with the people's mandate. They meant for you to do it. Everything you're doing is on behalf of the people, so long as you can manufacture belief and consent that at some point, more than half of the people supported you. And just listen to her go, describing all the various kinds of people. People from every walk of life, people who aren't even American. Everyone counts as the people supporting Kamala Harris, which is strange because no one ever voted for her. And she didn't have any delegates. She's never won a primary. And no one would even think that she's vice president if it weren't for already stealing millions and millions and millions and millions of votes to make it look like they had a majority over Donald Trump. Because that's their thing. Even in 2016, when Donald Trump won the Electoral College, they still claimed that they won a popular vote. And that meant Donald Trump could be president for a little while, but the people didn't really want him to be president. Trump wasn't for the people. He didn't even have a majority of people on his side. They were for the people, and that's why they ran that soft coup that never stopped. Now, sure, tens of thousands of people, sometimes 100,000 people, will show up to see Donald Trump anytime Donald Trump decides to do just about anything. And Kamala can't do that without AI-generated images or some pop star playing a concert. But still, Kamala's for the people. And of course, so were Mao and Lenin. They use that kind of language too. You know who's not for the people? Donald Trump. Who's he for? The billionaires.
I think everyone here knows he doesn't actually fight for the middle class. He doesn't actually fight for the middle class. Instead, he fights for himself and his billionaire friends. And he will give them another round of tax breaks that will add up to $5 trillion to the national debt. And all the while, he intends to enact what in effect is a national sales tax, call it a Trump tax, that would raise prices on middle-class families by almost $4,000 a year.
What in the world could she possibly be talking about? And of course, she doesn't know. Donald Trump has been opposed nonstop for 9 straight years by all of the most powerful people in the world, the people who control almost every industry, institution, government, global governing body, the bankers. The list just goes on and on. The totality of the old guard, including academia, political parties, the tech companies, sports and entertainment, the military-industrial complex, attorneys, lobbyists, think tanks, all of them with unlimited funds from global, quote-unquote, philanthropists and the regime bankers who can print money on the backs of American people anytime they want. All of those have opposed Donald Trump the entire time. But Donald Trump has billionaire friends now. And why does that sales pitch sell? Because they've marketed Elon Musk and his tech pals as Donald Trump's new best friends, which means that's all Trump ever cared about, even though everything they do is sponsored by Big Pharma. These people are insane. And speaking of insanity, how is this for a review of Kamala Harris?
You know, this is what really Trump is struggling with, because overnight, Kamala Harris became the candidate of change. And if you look historically at presidential elections, people who make up their mind at the end have a tendency to go towards the candidate they think is most likely to change things. And she is now the candidate of change. You know how happy the campaign was this morning when headlines across the country were a new way forward?
At some point, you have to wonder, are we getting punked? The woman pretending to be vice president is asking for the opportunity to pretend to be president based on change while she's there? Who do they think they're selling this to? Any of their little standard issue villager foot soldiers who take in and memorize all the slogans and all the supporting logic of all the slogans, they're going to go out this weekend and talk about the DNC and how excited they are about Kamala Harris. And they're going to tell people Kamala is the candidate of change. And those little commies will be laughed at. That is an embarrassing thing to go out and repeat. At some point, things go too far, even for their little commie foot soldiers. They are doing it so that they can succeed in the party of false decorum. Unless they're being directly incentivized with money or they're being threatened with some kind of punishment, they're doing it all for social credit. They want to score points and impress people in hopes that those people will help them succeed by pulling them up to the next rung on that ladder. And when those social incentives flip, they stop repeating the slogans. And while they might still have a whole bunch of people on their side who aren't ready to move over to Trump yet, they're running out of people who are going to pretend not to know what a woman is, or pretend that masks and lockdowns were a good idea, or pretend that Joe Biden received 81 million real lawful American votes. And they're definitely running out of people who think Kamala Harris is a candidate for change. So Kamala Harris's vibes-based, joy-based campaign, ridiculous. Kamala presenting herself as something new and different is absurd. And Claire McCaskill pretending she's the candidate of change is absolutely preposterous, because Donald Trump has her beaten at every level. And that was true last night. It was true this morning. And it's more true now than it has ever been. Because this afternoon, at a special event in Arizona, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. came out today to say that he was suspending his campaign and would shift his support to Donald Trump. Now, if you've been listening to this show, you know we've been talking about that for a year and a half. And if you're listening to Tim Pool or Ben Shapiro or Tucker Carlson, you haven't thought about it ever. I wonder which of those approaches would allow for better perspective today.
In the name of saving democracy, the Democratic Party set itself to dismantling it, lacking confidence in its candidate, that its candidate could win in a fair election at the voting booth. The DNC waged continual legal warfare against both President Trump and myself. Each time that our volunteers turned in those towering boxes of signatures needed to get on the ballot, the DNC dragged us into court, state after state, attempting to erase their work and to subvert the will of the voters who had signed those petitions. It deployed DNC-aligned judges to throw me and other candidates off the ballot and to throw President Trump in jail. It ran a sham primary that was rigged to prevent any serious challenge to President Biden. Then, when a predictably bungled debate performance precipitated the palace coup against President Biden, the same shadowy DNC operatives appointed his successor, also without an election. They installed a candidate who was so unpopular with voters that she dropped out in 2020 without winning a single delegate. My uncle and my father both relished debate. They prided themselves on their capacity to go toe-to-toe with any opponent in the battle over ideas. they would be astonished to learn of a Democratic Party presidential nominee who, like Vice President Harris, has not appeared in a single interview or an unscripted encounter with voters for 35 days. This is profoundly undemocratic. How are people to choose when they don't know whom they are choosing? And how can this look to the rest of the world? My father and my uncle were always conscious of America's image abroad because of our nation's role as the template for democracy, the role model for democratic processes, and the leader of the free world. Instead of showing us her substance and character, the DNC and its media organs engineered a surge of popularity for Vice President Harris based upon, well, nothing.
Now, I'm not going to be able to go through the whole speech because it was about 40 minutes long. We will spend plenty of time on Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and his effect over the next few weeks, couple months, probably longer than that because he's not going anywhere. I went through a bit of this on the subscriber live stream on Wednesday afternoon, but I discussed Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in a potential role with Donald Trump on March 6th of 2023. You can go listen to the episode. It's called CPAC. The segment on RFK starts about 36 minutes in. And I suggested that he would have this exact effect. He would show people that our elections are rigged because the Democrat primaries would be rigged against him. I talked about him going after Big Pharma. And if you don't understand what is good about Robert F. Kennedy Jr., I suggest you read the book, The Real Anthony Fauci. You don't have to like his political opinions. His political opinions, by and large, don't matter, and we have to stop pretending that they do and that they should. Think through your voting history. Have any of the people you have voted for ended up representing values that you don't share? Have they ever lied about their values to try to convince you that you do share their values? Have they claimed to share your values while doing things that are antithetical to your values? I'm guessing the answer is yes for all of those. There's a strong chance that right now you're supporting politicians who claim to support your values and don't. And there's a possibility, no matter how small, that one of them might be the guy pretending to be Donald Trump's running mate. The point is that the president is supposed to be the tribune of the people and the servant of the people. He is supposed to do his job on behalf of the people. He's not supposed to decide what happens with issues like guns or abortion. We've been totally misled about our politics and totally misled about what a president is meant to be doing. Now, I'm not arguing that there's no possibility RFK Jr. is misrepresenting who he is. Maybe that's possible. But if he's not, he's going full bore after some of the most powerful aspects of the deep state. The very same deep state who assassinated his father, his uncle, and his cousin. People got excited about J.D. Vance and Ron DeSantis and Vivek Ramaswamy calling out all of MAGA's enemies. RFK Jr. is doing it, and it doesn't sound like he's doing it to impress people because he's always been this guy. And yeah, he's been a liberal, but I was a liberal 5 years ago. I don't know if you'd call Donald Trump a liberal, but he used to be a Democrat. He used to be further over in the direction where RFK Jr. is or used to be, where I used to be, than he is now. So even Donald Trump has changed. But the truth is we don't need signals about ideological purity, especially when most of the time the people expressing their ideological purity don't actually represent it. We were told by the Ron DeSantis simps that they were the most conservative people ever. Donald Trump was uniparty compared to them. Donald Trump was a liberal compared to them. All Donald Trump supporters were liberals compared to them. But they also turned away when they saw an election stolen in broad daylight to remain in the party of false decorum and continue participating in the incentive structure in hopes of becoming powerful in the GOP establishment. They watched the usurpation of the United States of America, and they figured it would be fine because in a few years, they would be in power. Not conservatives, not Republicans, them. I don't know what to call that. Treasonous, maybe. It doesn't sound too conservative to me, especially when you consider that the same election fraud apparatus is the means by which the Uniparty, on behalf of the global regime, is keeping the abortion industry running. That's not very conservative. And regardless of its conservative status, it's not at all patriotic. Those people tell us they're the most ideologically pure people on the planet, and many of them supported masks and lockdowns, obviously the stolen election. They lied about the very violent insurrection, and now they are supporting never-ending foreign proxy wars. So sorry, I'm not that into ideological purity. The war we're in is not liberal versus conservative. It's not right versus left. It's not red versus blue. It's not Democrat versus Republican. It's the people versus the Uniparty and the global regime. Find me a single Republican senator who has gone as hard at our actual enemy as Robert F. Kennedy Jr. did today. He's actually putting something on the line when he gives Donald Trump a full-throated endorsement. Who's a bigger asset to Donald Trump? Who's more supportive right now? Robert F. Kennedy Jr. or Ted Cruz? It's not even a question. Who's more hated by the Uniparty? Again, not even a question. And people think that Ted Cruz is one of the most effective conservatives in the country. And have a listen to this.
I was delighted when Kelly told me that day that he had also been advising President Trump. He told me President Trump was anxious to talk to me about chronic disease and other subjects and to explore avenues of cooperation. He asked if I would take a call from the president. President Trump telephoned me a few minutes later, and I met with him the following day. A few weeks later, I met again with President Trump and his family members and closest advisors in Florida. In a series of long, intense discussions, I was surprised to discover that we are aligned on many key issues. In those meetings, he suggested that we join forces as a unity party. We talked about Abraham Lincoln's team of rivals. That arrangement would allow us to disagree publicly and privately and fiercely, if need be, on issues over which we differ, while working together on the existential issues upon which we are in concordance. I was a ferocious critic of many of the policies during his first administration, and there are still issues and approaches upon which we continue to have very serious differences. But we are aligned with each other on other key issues like ending the forever wars, ending the childhood disease epidemics, securing the border, protecting freedom of speech, unraveling the corporate capture of our regulatory agencies, getting the U.S. intelligence agencies out of the business of propagandizing and censoring and surveilling Americans and interfering with our elections. Following my first discussion with President Trump, I tried unsuccessfully to open similar discussions with Vice President Harris. Vice President Harris declined to meet or even to speak with me. Suspending my candidacy is a heart-rending decision for me, but I'm convinced that it's the best hope for ending the Ukraine war and ending the chronic disease epidemic that is eroding our nation's vitality from the inside, and for finally protecting free speech. I feel a moral obligation to use this opportunity to save millions of American children, above all things.
Now, again, I've been talking about this possibility for quite a long time and thinking about this possibility for quite a long time. So I'm very happy to see this now coming out, becoming a reality, being recognized by people. Think about how this would change our politics. A president and a vice president, or a president with members of his cabinet having open disagreements in public so that one takes one side, one takes the other. The American people have a discussion, an uncensored discussion, and come to some conclusion about what they really think. And then when they vote in a real election, they will have heard the best case made for both sides of the argument, not demagoguery from a corporate media within the controlled opposition dynamic, and not all the nonsense point scoring among the chattering class trying to solve the news. He talks about a unity party, and my guess is that in the future it would just be no parties. That's what it should be. There should be no political parties. He talks about Abraham Lincoln's team of rivals. With no political parties, it's actually kind of easy to form a team of rivals, because then you look for the best person to do the job instead of the person who says the right things in front of the television cameras, or the person the lobbyists or corporate interests want you to take, or the person the party needs you to take because they need a new star, always thinking about the next election and the one after that. Because in their system, the only way to create real change is to win election after election after election after election. But whoops, the elections are stolen. How are we going to fix it? I don't know, but you better hope to win a lot of elections in a row. Now, how does this affect the 2024 election? Well, in one sense, it doesn't, because this is a fake election, and it's probably not going to happen. There's no reason for it to happen. Donald Trump won in 2020. He has not conceded. As far as what's been publicly reported, that situation has not been resolved, but I imagine in the future we will find out it was resolved years ago, but we were prevented from knowing that. We don't need to have another fake election. We need to resolve the old fake election. But if we need to get the hose again, I guess we're going to have to keep on pretending for a few more months. Now, if we do resolve the 2020 election, then the vice president's role would be Mike Pence's, not J.D. Vance's. And that's what I said on the day that Trump posted on Truth that J.D. Vance was selected as the character to play his running mate. In the event that the 2020 election gets sorted out, we don't have an election right now. That changes everything. So if Mike Pence steps down once that's resolved, does J.D. Vance go in there? Maybe. Or maybe it's Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And again, I kind of said all this about a year and a half ago, too. But let's say we're not going to get enough of the country to realize all this over the course of the next 80 days or whatever it is. We can do that. That could happen in one day. But let's say that we don't and things still continue down this path and somehow the election's not canceled. Well, then what would this move do? Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s got a nice little chunk of support. It says in the polls that it's anywhere between like 3 and 9%. They usually don't let him get to 10% because they don't want to give him that other digit. It's good while it's only in single digits. That makes him seem very small and irrelevant, like he doesn't actually have any support at all. But he does have support. He has a lot of support. He has some significant media support, too. In fact, a big part of the info op that I've referred to many times is extremely RFK Jr. friendly while being anti-Trump. We'll see how they come around. Democrats who are sick of the Democrat establishment, they're sick of Biden, they're sick of Kamala. They find it embarrassing to support any of them. They don't agree with their values or ideas. They didn't like how the Democrat Party responded during COVID. They're not happy with Big Pharma. They weren't fans of vaccines or vaccine mandates, especially everything that happened with the children. They're all RFK Jr. fans. And if you think that the polling was properly representing that portion of the population, I got to say, I think you're missing something pretty substantial. We're going to hear all sorts of polling numbers that tell us how many people who say they're supporting Robert F. Kennedy Jr. will now go support Donald Trump versus how many will go and support Kamala. It's like a litmus test for Trump derangement. And they'll probably try to tell us that that number's really low. Donald Trump's barely gaining any support. But that's wrong. Because Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s support base was people who were leaving the Democrat Party. They are going to continue heading in the same direction. They're not going to turn around and go back. Whatever RFK Jr.'s support base is, Donald Trump is going to get the vast majority of that. So at this point, I think it's pretty safe to stop worrying 24 hours a day, 7 days a week about what's going to happen in the fake election. Trump won in 2020 by a lot. Trump has gotten far stronger and far more popular over these last 4 years, and MAGA has grown enormous. Trump himself often says, we don't need more votes. We have plenty of votes. What we need is to guard the vote. Well, now we have even more votes. It's not close. There's no way it could be close. And people won't believe it when they're told that it is close, because everyone's going to look around at them and say, come on, commie, you don't really believe that, do you? You think 50% of Americans want to keep the system as it is? There weren't that many Trump deranged people in 2020, and it ain't 2020. It kind of almost seems like all of this was the reason that we've had to go through this period, this pause, this lull while we have this fake president. And everything's confusing, the television gaslighting us all the time until we're willing to turn it off. People saying things that have the ring of truth that you know must be true, but still also must be a crazy conspiracy theory, because look what the TV says. It says the opposite thing is happening. And I know the TV lies, but they can't just be misrepresenting everything, can they? Well, yeah, they totally can. And understanding that sort of stuff is what allows you to see out well beyond the horizon that the television creates for you. Thinking independently about these things was what led me to believing this was possible in the first place a year and a half ago. I'm not privy to the plan, but I know there is one. And I know they're trying to do good things. They're trying to save the country. They're not doing all of this so that they can win a fake election in 2024 because people haven't figured out the 2020 election yet. That's not what all of this is for. And hey, check out this really weird thing that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said today.
Those networks instead ran a continuous deluge of hit pieces with inaccurate, often vile, pejoratives and defamatory smears. Some of those same networks and colluded with the DNC to keep me off the debate stage. Representatives of those networks are in this room right now, and I'll just take a moment to ask you to consider the many ways that your institutions have abdicated this really sacred responsibility, the duty of a free press to safeguard democracy and to challenge always the party in power. Instead of maintaining that posture of fierce skepticism toward authority, your institutions have made themselves government mouthpieces and stenographers for the organs of power. You didn't alone cause the devolution of American democracy, but you could have prevented it.
So he's talking to the media. He says, take a moment to consider the many ways your institutions have abdicated this really sacred responsibility, the duty of a free press to safeguard democracy and to always challenge the party in power. Instead of maintaining that posture of skepticism toward authority, your institutions have made themselves government mouthpieces and stenographers for the organs of power. And you didn't alone cause the devolution of American democracy, but you could have prevented it. Now, he's obviously exactly right about the media, and he talked extensively about the problem with censorship and media control. But did you notice the wording he chose? The devolution of American democracy? The media alone didn't cause the devolution of American democracy, but they could have prevented it. And they could have prevented it. They could have told the American people the truth, but that's not their job, because the sacred role of the free press is a myth and an illusion. We are told that there is a free press holding the government accountable so that we assume we know everything we need to know to make sure the government's doing the right thing. But now that illusion is gone. It's been exposed as this ridiculous mythology. There's nothing sacred about the New York Times. We don't need to have reverence for the Washington Post. And CNN is not the most trusted name in news. If they wanted to be seen that way, they could have and should have acted that way. But they didn't, because that's not their role. Their role is to advertise a false reality where, if enough people believe it, their corporate sponsors amass all the power, wealth, and control. And that job, their real job, they've done really well. Now, if you still don't believe in devolution, that's okay. I'm not trying to convince you. Maybe it's something slightly different than devolution. And we just keep hearing that word come up, including from the mouth of someone who's been involved with the plan, whatever that plan is, for an awfully long time. So involved and in such a way that people could predict this day a year and a half ago. Isn't it amazing? Now, I want to play one more segment from his speech, and only because I think it's extremely memeable and I feel like I'm probably going to say it a lot. But here's RFK Jr. talking about the problem we have with our foods and all the chemicals and hormones that are put in them, and how it's been awful for our health and it's caused this obesity problem. And he's making a remark about how obesity used to be a far more rare thing, so rare that if someone was actually hugely obese, they could get paid to participate in a freak show.
When somebody was obese, they were sent to the circus.
When somebody was obese, they were sent to the circus. I am going to think about sending people to the circus for a really long time. I couldn't even believe he said that. That's amazing. I will take all of that he can give us. That was almost Trumpian in its honesty and hilarity, combined with the fact that sensitive people will be extraordinarily offended about something he said that just happens to be true. And just to be clear, I'm not only going to use this talking about obese people. In fact, I probably will really rarely use it talking about obese people, except for maybe J.B. Pritzker. We can send him to the circus. I won't even use it to talk about Chris Christie, because I would never say that Chris Christie should be sent to the circus. And I would also never call him a fat pig. I would never call Chris Christie a fat pig. That would be extremely rude. And so as we wrap this up, I think I'm going to leave you with this. This is from March 6th, 2023, in an episode of this here show titled simply CPAC. He was seen as an anti-establishment alternative. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has that without the commitment to global regime communism that unavoidably intersects with pharma. So imagine the scenario a year from now where the primaries have started in earnest, the voting has begun, and we're approaching Super Tuesday. That's the night that sank Bernie in 2016 with South Carolina. They called up old Jim Clyburn. He cranked up the election fraud machine, and there it was. Hillary Clinton is the winner. Same thing in 2020. South Carolina, Jim Clyburn cranks up the election fraud machine, and Bernie's finished. It's going to be Joe Biden. Imagine being a Biden 2020 voter who understands that the vaccines are not safe, not effective, and were never necessary, and in fact are responsible for death and maiming and sterilization, including of little children. Talking about a year from now, right? Another full year of people waking up to all these facts. But imagine being one of those people and then seeing the election stolen from RFK Jr. in broad daylight. How do you react at that point? What do you say? What do you do? Do you realize once and for all that election fraud is very, very real and that they don't care about Democrat and Republican? That is a possible outcome of this. So if he wants to throw his hat in the ring, good for him. I don't want him to be president, and I don't want Democrat Party politics running anything whatsoever. But he may very well end up presenting himself as an agent of chaos in the Democrat Party. If they go and steal primary elections from RFK Jr. and he has this big base of support who are now anti-vaccine and understand that he was telling the truth about an issue for a very long time, he could wake up a whole lot of still sleeping communists. I don't believe there is any possible scenario where he wins the Democrat nomination and it ends up being Trump versus Robert F. Kennedy Jr. So there's not much need to analyze the political dynamic that might emerge there. It's entirely possible that his candidacy alone and him being on the debate stages and going through a bit of that primary could wake a bunch of Biden voters up completely about the vaccines and about election fraud, and that would be incredible. It's the sort of thing that you could imagine Donald Trump actually setting in motion. There was a time where the two of them were going to be working together to get to the bottom of that vaccine issue. But then the claim is, the narrative is, that Donald Trump disbanded their panel after he was paid off by Big Pharma, as if Donald Trump's politics are for sale. We've already seen that they're not. But if that happens, it will be fun to watch. And there's another little section on RFK in that episode as well. And we've discussed it many times since. We will again. In fact, the rumor is that RFK Jr. is going to be joining Donald Trump for an event in Arizona. Trump announced yesterday that there would be a special guest. It's not Beyonce, but Beyonce sucks anyway. I will be back on Monday at the same reasonable time on the same reasonable podcast network. I don't have a network. Masks and lockdowns don't work. They lied to you about a pandemic.
In my mind, that's the end game.
If you're listening for free and would like to support the show, the best way to do that is by signing up for a paid subscription at imyourmoderator.substack.com. You can find the info stream over on Telegram at t.me/veryreasonable. The merch site is cancelcouture.com. And for all my other links, you can visit linktree.com/imyourmoderator. And I'll see you soon. Down on the range.